So as we turn to the consequences of default, Jason, I'll start with you. I mean, why should people care about this?
Yeah, so first of all, just getting close in 2011, we saw a dramatic decline in consumer confidence. We saw interest rates go up, and we saw the stock market really slide. All of that was probably bad for the economy right then. Back then, you couldn't quantify it, and that was getting it done on time. If you go past the date, there would be several types of economic consequences. One set would operate through consumer confidence and business confidence and investment and spending choices they make that add up to what happens in the economy as a whole. A second would be through financial markets, where rising interest rates and falling stock market would make it harder to access capital, borrow, grow, and the like. And finally, there's just literally the government spending less money would have a Keynesian effect on the economy, eventually leading to a contraction. What is the magnitude of all of this and on what timetable? No one knows, because we've never tried it here in the United States. No one has ever done this in any other country either. I liken it to, you might be shooting yourself in the toe, which is unpleasant, but not horrible. You might be shooting yourself in the hand, and you might be shooting yourself in the head. Moreover, each day you go past the debt limit, the X date, you'd be loading the gun again and firing it again. And so if you hit the toe the first 3 days in a row, on the fourth day, maybe it would end up being your hand. So we don't know exactly what time scale, but we know it's all bad. None of it's good. And the question is, how bad and how quickly does it become bad? And hopefully we'll never know the answer to that question.
Well, those are some of the imponderables on the economy. What about the effect on the federal budget, Rohit? What would be the immediate effect if we went over that X date?
Well, so my memory is we collect about 3/4 of what we spend. So you would immediately cut federal spending by effectively 25%, whether you actually just stopped on 25% or you did effectuate that by delaying payments, which might be the more, if you're going to manage your way through the crisis, might be a better path forward. But so you would have an immediate reduction in federal spending, but not in a thoughtful, let's think about where we want to prioritize spending kind of way, but more of in a haphazard, like we're just going to take a meat axe to the federal budget. And look, there are almost certainly some elected officials in the Congress today who think a 1/4 reduction in federal spending would be an acceptable policy result. They don't have the majority in either chamber, but there are certainly some that probably subscribe to that point of view. But I don't think there are any that would take the point of view that 25% reduction in federal spending ought to be just done sort of haphazardly. They would have a theory of the case as to how they wanted to reduce federal spending. They would not sign up for indiscriminate reduction in federal spending, whether that's Medicare or Social Security, which both parties have said they should not be on the table for a conversation, at least not in this transaction, or defense spending or NIH spending or whatever it is. There would be something there that people would object on both sides to being reduced. So it's a really foolish way to go about achieving something, even if you're ultimately in agreement on the goal, which again, I don't think there is 218 votes in the House nor 60 in the Senate for a 1/4 reduction in federal spending. And to sort of Jason's fundamental point, while we don't know exactly the result, the range of options are somewhere between bad and sort of unimaginably bad. Like there's no happy story of default and then better things follow. It is only how bad will it be.
And that spending cut, because you're right. I mean, I'm sure there's some people who say, well, all right, a 25% spending cut, that's great. But it's a phony spending cut in the sense that it's only a delay. I mean, you're only not spending because you can't borrow, but it's not canceling the obligations that generate that spending. So, unless there's an accompanying policy change that changes the spending, you're just sort of building up a big stack of unpaid bills, isn't that?
Yeah, I mean, look, at some level, if you were to just play out the hypothetical to its extreme, setting aside the devastating economic consequences, if you just never raised the debt limit, right? We just sustained it where it is today, for the infinite horizon, right? You would eventually then, I assume you'd have to authorize the Treasury Secretary or some executive official to make some decisions about which bills we're going to pay and which bills we're just not going to pay. I can't imagine any member of Congress would be comfortable just delegating that level of authority to the secretary, but that's effectively what you would be doing. Again, this isn't a world where you default, you go past the X date, and you never clean it up. Now, you'd have that would create a whole set of other problems. So I think at that point, the least of your worries might be who has the authority to decide which bills we're going to pay, because you'd be grappling with, over the long haul, to use Jason's analogy, eventually the self-inflicted injury would be fatal. And you'd have much more devastating economic consequences to wrestle with than like who gets to decide which bills get paid today.
Right, because there would be the issue, for example, the unemployment rate would rise to approximately 100%. You'd have 150 million people collecting unemployment insurance.